At 5:02 in the morning, 6 aircraft crossed a seawall at 200 feet. No warning. No announcement. Just rotors tearing through the dark above the Persian Gulf, and an Iranian garrison commander who had already been awake for 2 hours, waiting for exactly this. What happened next would decide whether the world's most critical shipping lane stayed dark or came back online. Don't forget to hit the like, share and subscribe button before we continue. To understand why this raid matters, you need to understand what Iran had done to the Strait of Hormuz. Since February 28, 2026, following joint U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran that included the killing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz, threatening any vessel attempting to pass through. Wikipedia. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through that narrow channel, and Iranian missile, drone, and small boat attacks forced most commercial ships to halt transit entirely, sending global energy prices sharply higher. Gulf News. But Iran's most invisible weapon wasn't a missile or a drone. It was silence, electronic silence. Within 24 hours of the conflict opening, electronic interference disrupted the navigation systems of more than 1,100 commercial ships across UAE, Qatari, Omani, and Iranian waters. CNN ships appeared on satellite tracking systems to be positioned over airports, inland roads, and in one case, directly over a nuclear power plant. Crews navigating near the strait faced a fog of electronic warfare that left them effectively blind to the positions of other vessels. Bloomberg. This wasn't an accident. Iran had turned GPS itself into a weapon, and somewhere in the middle of the strait sat a hardened island facility responsible for broadcasting the jamming signal that was blinding an entire coalition. 11 days. That's how long it had been running. Tonight, the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit was going to shut it off. 6 MV-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft came in at 200 feet, spread across a quarter-mile front. The Osprey combines helicopter-style vertical takeoff with turboprop cruise flight, carrying roughly 24 Marines at speeds approaching 270 knots, fast enough and versatile enough to insert a strike force directly onto a hardened target while remaining based aboard ships far offshore. Army recognition. But the Iranian garrison commander, Colonel Dariush Nazari, had spent the previous Tuesday repositioning every single defensive post on that island. Not scrambling. Not reacting. Preparing. His 28 soldiers were already at their weapons when the first Osprey crossed the outer wall. The northwestern rooftop emplacement opened fire at 500 meters. The lead pilot broke hard right without a word, a sharp banking maneuver that dropped the aircraft 30 feet in seconds. Still bearing toward the island. Overhead, the AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters, capable of precision fires using Hellfire missiles and guided rockets. Army recognition, found the rooftop position within 2 seconds and silenced it. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Reyes hit the fast rope at 5:04 a.m. 16 feet in 4 seconds. 4 Marines followed within 10 yards. No commands needed. They had rehearsed this 40 times. The 40th time was the first one that counted. At 5:07 a.m., 6 drones lifted from the eastern shore of the island. Not military grade. GPS-guided commercial frames, modified for payload, the exact kind of asymmetric countermeasure that costs $50,000 to counter aircraft worth $30 million. The Vipers destroyed 5 of them in seconds. The 6th found the tail section of the trailing CH-53E Super Stallion before anyone could get a clean angle on it. The damage was not catastrophic. It was enough. The Super Stallion yawed violently, tail rotor compromised, rotating through 40 degrees before the pilot arrested it through sheer mechanical force. Still flying, barely. But the assault approach was finished. The helicopter pushed north with 31 Marines still aboard and the heavy breaching equipment still sealed in its cases. This was the problem. The switching room in the basement, the one room the mission actually needed to destroy, was protected by a hydraulic steel door. And the only equipment capable of opening it was now 3 miles away on a damaged helicopter. Reyes stood outside the reinforced access door on the rooftop. One breach attempt. Standard charges. The door folded rather than fell, and her team pushed through into the stairwell. 2 floors below, a corridor, 60 feet of open tile, and Nazari's inner ring soldiers holding the passage to the switching room. Nobody moved. Both sides understood the geometry perfectly. Whoever crossed that corridor first would lose. First Sergeant Luis Mendez solved it from below. He had moved his 4-man team through a service corridor 1 floor down, a parallel passage he had memorized from reconnaissance photographs on the flight in. He reached the secondary entrance to the switching room. Unlocked. Still unlocked. 2 radio clicks to Reyes. She went north. He went east. Simultaneously. Nazari's soldiers, unable to hold 2 entry points at once, made the only rational choice. They fell back into the switching room itself and sealed the interior hydraulic door behind them. The room was locked. The mission's objective was locked inside it. Corporal James Ochoa didn't wait for orders. While Reyes called up options on the locked door, Ochoa was already moving across the compound, toward the antenna arrays outside the building, toward the physical transmission hardware that fed the switching room's jamming signal into the air. For cables, running in conduit along the antenna base. He pulled bolt cutters from his kit. First cable. Second cable. The jamming signal didn't fade. It stopped. Mid-transmission, the way a voice stops when a hand covers a mouth. Coalition navigation frequencies came back online in sequence across the Strait. 11 days of electronic darkness over the Persian Gulf ended with a pair of bolt cutters and a corporal who saw the problem differently. CENTCOM released its statement at 5:36 a.m. The jamming infrastructure at the Strait of Hormuz was disabled. Operations ongoing. But on the island, the operation wasn't over. 5 Iranian fast attack craft had emerged from the northeast. Not a relief force, a siege force. The difference matters. A relief force tries to reach the garrison and puts itself in range of the Vipers. A siege force simply surrounds the island and waits for the helicopters to run out of fuel. The lead Viper checked its fuel state. 24 minutes of loiter time. The replacement section from the support vessel was 20 minutes out. 4 minutes of uncovered airspace, and someone on one of those vessels had been tracking the Viper's patrol pattern and calculating their fuel consumption rate. The timing was not a coincidence. At 5:28 a.m., the damaged CH-53E called in from 3 miles north. Tail rotor partial. Directional control reduced but stable. The pilot could hold altitude. He couldn't execute an assault approach. What he could do, what his crew chief was already rigging, was a static hover 15 feet above the island's northern shore. Low enough for 31 Marines and their equipment to drop to the rocks below without fast ropes. 8 minutes to position. The helicopter arrived at 5:31 a.m., its damaged tail rotor audible from across the compound. An irregular harmonic beneath the normal rotor noise, the sound of machinery operating past its design limits on crew determination alone. The first Marines dropped from the starboard door onto the northern rock shelf. No ropes. A 5-foot drop onto stone. Absorbing it and moving immediately to clear the zone for the next man. 19 Marines were down when the lead attack craft ran its bow directly onto the eastern rock shelf, grinding hull against stone, boarding element coming over the rail before the scraping stopped. The second Viper, fuel state critical, made its final pass. One burst. The deck gun went silent. The helicopter peeled away northeast, done for the engagement. 11 minutes until the replacement Vipers arrived. The island's airspace now belonged to whoever was patient enough to wait 11 minutes. Inside the building, Mendez started the hydraulic breaching pump. It was loud. Directional. It would tell everyone inside exactly what was happening to their door for 90 seconds before it opened. He started it anyway. Inside the switching room, Nazari heard it immediately. For the first time in the entire operation, the register of his voice changed, not panic, but the compressed urgency of a man revising his timeline. He transmitted a single update to the attack craft outside. Accelerate. Then, the support vessel cut its searchlights on at maximum range. A gray hull, white bow wave, still distant but no longer abstract. The attack craft saw it too. The vessel that had run its bow onto the rock shelf began reversing off the stone. The boarding element paused mid-climb. The hydraulic gauge climbed toward operating pressure. Outside the door, Mendez watched it. Inside, Nazari's voice came, not through the radio, through the door itself. Directed at the Marines on the other side. 3 sentences in careful, prepared English. The voice of a man who had been constructing those sentences for the last 2 minutes while the pump ran. The gauge touched operating pressure. The door did not open. What this raid represents is bigger than one island, one door, or one garrison commander making a calculation about survival. The highest priority for American planners in this conflict is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, because Iran is effectively winning by strangling global energy supplies without firing a single ballistic missile at a warship. The GPS jamming, the fast boats, the hardened island facilities, these are asymmetric tools deployed against the most heavily armed navy on Earth, and they are working. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated publicly that the Strait of Hormuz could be open the next day if Iran stopped threatening global shipping. Fox News: the Marines, the Ospreys, the Vipers, the damaged Super Stallion returning anyway, all of it is the United States making the same statement in a different language. One corporal with bolt cutters reopened a navigation corridor that had been dark for 11 days. The door on the switching room stayed shut. The cables outside it did not. Sometimes the mission that matters most isn't the one on the rehearsal package. Please subscribe for more updates.